smell of fresh bread and simmering stew filled the small kitchen of the forward operating base in the mountains of Afghanistan. Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she checked the temperature of the ovens for the third time that morning. It was barely 5:30 a.m., and she had already been working for 2 hours. Being a Navy cook attached to a SEAL team meant early mornings and long days, but Maria had never complained. Not once in her 3 years of service. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. She was 26 years old, standing at 5 feet 4 inches tall, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and calloused hands that showed the work she put in every single day. Maria had joined the Navy right out of high school from a small town in Texas, where opportunities were limited. Her mother had worked 2 jobs to raise Maria and her younger brother after their father passed away. Maria wanted to give back, to serve her country, and to send money home to help her family. Cooking was what she knew best. Her grandmother had taught her the old family recipes, and Maria had a gift for making even the simplest military rations taste like home-cooked meals. The SEAL team she was assigned to, Team 7, appreciated her more than she realized. These warriors, who could go days without sleep and survive in the harshest conditions, always looked forward to the meals Maria prepared. She made sure they ate well because she knew that proper nutrition could mean the difference between life and death on a mission. The base was small, tucked into a valley surrounded by rocky mountains. Only 40 people were stationed there, including Team 7, which consisted of 12 SEALs, their commanding officer, Lieutenant James Burke, and support staff like Maria. The mission here was intelligence gathering. The SEALs would go out on operations, collect information about enemy movements, and report back to command. It was dangerous work, but everyone knew what they had signed up for. Maria flipped the last batch of pancakes and started plating the food. Breakfast was served at 6 a.m. sharp, and the team would be arriving soon. She heard footsteps approaching and looked up to see Danny Watson, one of the younger SEALs, peeking into the kitchen. "Morning, Santos. Smells amazing in here," Danny said with a tired smile. He was 23, fresh-faced, and reminded Maria of her younger brother. "Morning, Watson. Pancakes, eggs, and sausage today. Got some fresh fruit too," Maria replied, gesturing to the spread she had prepared. "You're the best, seriously, I was just dreaming about your cooking," Danny said, grabbing a plate. Over the next 30 minutes, the rest of Team 7 filed in for breakfast. They were a tight group, brothers in every sense of the word. There was Marcus Thompson, the team's medic, a calm and steady presence who never panicked even under fire. Then there was Jake Peterson, the explosives expert with a wild sense of humor that kept everyone's spirits up. Robert Kim handled communications, always calm and focused on his equipment. And of course, there was Lieutenant Burke, the leader of Team 7, a man in his mid-30s with sharp eyes and a reputation for bringing his men home safe. "Santos, you outdid yourself again," Lieutenant Burke said as he sat down with his plate. "When this deployment is over, you should open a restaurant." Maria laughed softly. "Just doing my job, sir. Making sure you all stay strong out there." "Well, we appreciate it." "Really?" Burke said, and the other men nodded in agreement. After breakfast, Maria cleaned the kitchen and began preparing lunch. The routine was predictable, but she never took it for granted. She knew that at any moment the alarms could sound, and the team could be called out on a mission. That was the nature of being stationed in a combat zone. At 11:15 a.m., the alarms did sound. Maria's heart jumped as she heard the loud, blaring noise echoing through the base. She quickly turned off the stoves and moved to the window. Outside, she could see the SEALs gearing up, moving with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Burke was shouting orders, and within minutes, the team was loaded into 2 helicopters that lifted off into the cloudy sky. Maria watched until the helicopters disappeared from view, then returned to her kitchen. She said a silent prayer for their safety, something she did every time they left the base. The hours that followed were always the hardest. She would go about her work, preparing meals for the remaining staff, but her mind was always with Team 7, wondering if they were safe, if they would all come back. The afternoon passed slowly. Maria prepared dinner and served it to the support staff at 6 p.m. There was still no word from Team 7. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes missions took longer than expected, but as the clock ticked past 8 p.m., then 9 p.m., Maria started to feel uneasy. She busied herself with cleaning, organizing supplies, anything to keep her mind occupied. At 10:45 p.m., the base commander, Major William Andrews, called an emergency meeting. Maria and all the remaining personnel gathered in the briefing room. The major's face was grim. "Listen up, everyone. We've lost communication with Team 7. Their last known position was 15 miles northeast of here. We've been trying to re-establish contact for the past 3 hours with no success. A rescue team is being assembled, but it will take time to get here. We need to stay alert and be prepared for anything," Major Andrews said. Maria's stomach dropped. Lost communication meant something had gone terribly wrong. She thought about Danny Watson's smile that morning, about Lieutenant Burke's kind words, about all the men she had come to care for like family. "What can we do?" someone asked. "For now, we hold the base and wait for orders. Stay armed and stay vigilant," the major replied. The meeting ended and everyone dispersed to their stations. Maria returned to her kitchen, but sleep was impossible. She sat at the small table, staring at the clock on the wall as the minutes crawled by. At 1:30 a.m., she heard the distant sound of gunfire. Her blood ran cold. The alarm sounded again, this time more urgent. Maria grabbed her radio and heard Major Andrews' voice crackling through the static. "We're under attack. Enemy forces approaching from the east. All personnel to defensive positions." This is not a drill. Maria's training kicked in. Every member of the military, regardless of their job, went through basic combat training. She ran to the armory where weapons were stored for emergencies. Her hands shook as she grabbed an M4 rifle and loaded it with magazines. She had qualified with this weapon in basic training, but had never fired it outside of a range. The sound of gunfire grew louder. Maria took up a position near the kitchen, using the walls for cover. Through the window, she could see muzzle flashes in the darkness. The enemy was closing in fast. The support staff and the handful of guards at the base were fighting back, but they were outnumbered. An explosion rocked the building, and Maria was thrown to the floor. Her ears rang as dust and debris filled the air. She coughed, trying to clear her lungs, and scrambled back to her feet. Through the broken window, she saw enemy fighters pouring into the compound. They were dressed in dark clothing, heavily armed, and moving with military precision. Maria's heart pounded in her chest. She had two choices: hide and hope they didn't find her, or fight. She thought about Team 7, about the men who were somewhere out there, possibly captured, possibly hurt. She thought about her mother and brother back home. She thought about why she had joined the Navy in the first place. To serve, to protect, to never give up. She raised her rifle and took aim at the nearest enemy fighter. Her finger squeezed the trigger and the rifle kicked against her shoulder. The fighter went down. Maria didn't have time to think about what she had just done. More enemies were coming. She fired again and again, her training guiding her movements. The fighting was chaos. Bullets whizzed past her, striking the walls and shattering glass. Maria moved from cover to cover, firing whenever she had a clear shot. She saw Major Andrews go down, hit in the leg. She ran to him, dragging him behind a concrete barrier. "Santos, get out of here." "Fall back," the major groaned, clutching his wounded leg. "Not without you, sir," Maria said firmly. She applied pressure to the wound with a piece of torn cloth, trying to stop the bleeding. Before she could do more, a group of enemy fighters surrounded them. Maria raised her rifle, but she was out of ammunition. She looked at the major, then at the enemies, and slowly raised her hands. The enemy commander, a tall man with a scarred face and cold eyes, stepped forward. He spoke in broken English. "You fight well for a cook, but fight is over. You come with us now." Maria and Major Andrews were forced to their feet and marched out of the base at gunpoint. As they were led away, Maria looked back at the burning buildings and felt a deep sense of anger and determination. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They were taken to a convoy of trucks waiting outside the base. Maria was shoved into the back of one truck, and Major Andrews was thrown in beside her. As the trucks drove through the dark mountain roads, Maria tried to assess their situation. There were at least 30 enemy fighters in the convoy, all heavily armed. Escaping would be nearly impossible, but she had to try. After what felt like hours, the truck stopped. Maria and the major were pulled out and dragged into a cave complex hidden in the mountains. Inside, the caves had been turned into a makeshift prison. And there, in a large chamber lit by flickering torches, Maria saw them. Team 7. The SEALs were bound and kneeling in a row, their faces bruised and bloody. Lieutenant Burke looked up as Maria was brought in, and his eyes widened in shock. "Santos, "What are you doing here?" he said, his voice hoarse. "They attacked the base. I'm sorry, sir." "I tried," Maria said, her voice breaking. "You have nothing to be sorry for," Burke said firmly. The enemy commander walked into the chamber, flanked by guards. He looked at the captured Americans with a cruel smile. "You are all prisoners now. Your military will pay for your release or you will die here. It is simple," he said in his broken English. Maria looked at Team 7, at the men she had cooked for, laughed with and cared about. She saw Danny Watson, his young face pale and frightened. She saw Marcus Thompson, the medic, trying to stay calm despite his injuries. She saw Jake Peterson, Robert Kim, and all the others, and she made a decision. She would not let them die here. She would not let this be the end of their story. Over the next few days, Maria and the others were kept in the cave complex. They were given minimal food and water, and the guards were brutal. But Maria observed everything. She watched the guard rotations, counted the number of enemies, and noted the layout of the caves. She also noticed something important. The guards underestimated her. To them, she was just a woman, just a cook. They didn't see her as a threat. That was their mistake. On the third night of their captivity, at approximately 2:17 a.m., Maria made her move. She had been slowly loosening the ropes binding her wrists for days, working at them whenever the guards weren't looking. Finally, the ropes came free. She waited until the guard nearest to her dozed off, then quietly moved toward him. Her heart hammered in her chest as she reached for the knife on the guard's belt. Her fingers closed around the handle and she pulled it free. The guard stirred and Maria didn't hesitate. She struck quickly, taking him down silently. She grabbed his rifle and moved to Lieutenant Burke. "Sir, I'm getting you out of here," she whispered as she cut his bonds. "Santos, this is suicide." "There are too many of them," Burke whispered back. "We don't have a choice. It's now or never," Maria said. Burke looked into her eyes and saw the determination there. He nodded. "Okay, let's do this." They worked quickly, freeing the rest of Team 7 and Major Andrews. The SEALs, despite their injuries, immediately shifted into combat mode. They were warriors, and even unarmed and beaten, they were dangerous. Maria handed out the weapons she had taken from the guard. "We move through the caves to the exit. Stay quiet and stay together," Burke whispered. They moved as one unit, navigating the dark tunnels. Maria's heart pounded with every step, but she kept her focus. They encountered 2 more guards, and the SEALs took them down quickly and silently. But as they neared the exit, the alarm was raised. Shouts echoed through the caves, and footsteps thundered toward them. "Run!" Burke shouted. They sprinted toward the cave entrance as enemy fighters poured in behind them. Gunfire erupted, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Maria fired back, covering the team as they ran. She saw Danny Watson stumble, and she grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. "Keep moving, Watson. Don't stop," she urged. They burst out of the cave into the cold mountain night. The enemy trucks were still parked nearby. Burke and the others rushed to the nearest truck while Maria and Marcus Thompson provided covering fire. Bullets struck the rocks around them, sending chips of stone flying. "Get in the truck." "Go!" Maria shouted. Everyone piled into the truck. Jake Peterson hotwired the vehicle and the engine roared to life. As the truck sped away, Maria saw enemy fighters running after them, firing their weapons. She leaned out the window and returned fire, her rifle bucking in her hands. The truck raced down the mountain road, the enemy in pursuit. It was a wild chase through the darkness, the truck bouncing over rough terrain. But the SEALs were resourceful. Jake Peterson drove like a madman, taking sharp turns and using the terrain to their advantage. Slowly, they began to lose their pursuers. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing where they could see the lights of a friendly outpost in the distance. Maria slumped back in her seat, exhausted but relieved. They had made it. They were alive. When they arrived at the outpost, medical teams rushed to treat the wounded. Maria sat on a bench outside the medical tent, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline. Lieutenant Burke approached her, his face bandaged but his eyes warm. "Santos, what you did back there, you saved all our lives. I don't know how to thank you," he said. "I just did what needed to be done, sir." "Same as any of you would have," Maria replied quietly. "No. What you did was extraordinary. You're not just a cook, Santos. You're a warrior," Burke said. In the weeks that followed, Maria Santos became something of a legend. Her story spread through the military, and she was awarded the Silver Star for her bravery. But Maria didn't do it for the recognition. She did it because when the moment came, when her team needed her, she refused to back down. She returned to duty, back to her kitchen, back to cooking for the troops. But something had changed. The SEALs of Team 7 looked at her differently now. They saw her not just as the person who fed them, but as one of them, a member of the team, a fighter. Danny Watson would often stop by the kitchen to chat, and he always thanked her for pulling him forward when he stumbled. Marcus Thompson taught her advanced first aid techniques, saying she had earned the right to know more. Jake Peterson joked that she was a better shot than half the team, and Lieutenant Burke, well, he made sure that Maria Santos received the recognition she deserved. He wrote a detailed report of her actions, and it went all the way up the chain of command. Years later, after her service ended, Maria did open that restaurant back in Texas, just like Lieutenant Burke had suggested. She called it the Warriors Table, and on the wall she hung a photo of Team 7, all of them smiling, healthy, and alive. Beside it was her silver star, a reminder of the night she went from being a cook to being a warrior. But Maria never forgot the most important lesson she learned that night in the mountains of Afghanistan. When the people you care about are in danger, when everything is on the line, it doesn't matter what your job title is. What matters is what you're willing to do. What matters is that you stand up and fight no matter the odds. And that's exactly what Maria Santos did. She stood up, picked up her weapon, and fought for her team. And in doing so, she proved that heroes come in all forms, even in the form of a Navy cook who refused to let her brothers in arms die on her watch.